So over here on the left, we have the Banshee microgrid, which is a radial 3-feeder microgrid. On feeder 1, there's a synchronous generator, and on feeder 2, there's a grid-forming inverter and a grid-following inverter. And on feeder 3, there's a synchronous generator. And all 3 feeders are currently connected to the grid. So the first showcase of the distributed control is to island the microgrid from the main grid by driving the tie line power flow across the point of interconnection with the grid to 0. Once that is done successfully, we should have an islanded microgrid, all 3 feeders in one grid, and then we are going to turn on distributed frequency control for that islanded microgrid. However, for this test, we are going to introduce a malicious node on feeder 3. And the remedial action scheme for that will be to island this feeder from the grid and then turn on local frequency control on this microgrid. So by the end of the simulation, we should have one islanded microgrid over here and then one islanded microgrid over here that has been deemed malicious and distributed control has been turned off. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to drive the active and reactive power flow here to 0 by enabling islanding. And we can see here that all of the nodes are currently trusted. So I'm going to start this. And the distributed controls, we are being sent set points and all 3 nodes are trusted. And we are now waiting for the system to island. So right now the frequency is constant at 60 Hertz because we're still connected to the grid. And once we are now islanded, like we are now, see here islanded, frequency control is running distributedly on all feeders. And we still trust all nodes, except right now it has just lost trust. So we have physically islanded this feeder from the system, and now it is running on its own local frequency. However, because we were able to detect the malicious node, we saved the rest of the system, and now feeders 1 and 2 are still running. So as soon as I start the enable islanding here, we should receive some set points from Eric from the distributed control, and that will drive the active power and reactive power through the tie line here to 0. So we've received the set points, starting to drive, and then we've just lost trust, and that has islanded feeder 3 from the system. So now feeder 3 is running independently islanded with only local secondary frequency control, and we are also still islanding at the POI, and the resources on feeders 1 and 2 are now driving this power to 0. So now we have successfully islanded. We can see that up here, that feeder is islanded, and we can see that loss of trust is persists. So that way we still no longer trust feeder 3, and it is islanded on its own. So now we're running in 2 separate microgrids, one of which here is running distributed frequency control among these 2 nodes, these 2 feeders, and then this feeder over here is running just local frequency control.